would have waited an eternity for this. It's over, Prime.
Greetings and welcome to another episode of the Agile Uprising podcast. I am your host, Jay Hrcsko. Joining me, we have fellow board members Andy Cleff.
Hey, good evening.
Chris Murman.
Please tell me when it stops.
James Gifford, looking like he escaped from a black site somewhere in the Middle East.
What up?
And special guest, coalition member and friend of ours, Rob Legatie. Rob, how are you?
Hello there.
All right. So the topic of this episode is actually from Rob himself. So that's why he's on the show. Rob and I were texting back and forth about a previous episode, and he said, hey, guys, if you're going to talk transformation, let's talk about coaches. And let's talk about the continue, pivot, kill, or buy, sell, hold when it comes to Agile coaches. When do you need them? When do you not need them? When is it time to hire more? When is it time to get rid of them? So I'm hoping we have some interesting conversation from the panel. But let's start by laying out some ground rules. And it may be a little pedantic, but let's start with the nomenclature. So I'm going to start with you, Andy Cleff. How would you define, now we're talking about an Agile coach. How would you define an Agile coach?
It's just like the A word. It's a lightning rod, and it's so full of different interpretations for people. I love I guess it's the ICI practitioner approach, where it talks about the different stances of a lean Agile practitioner. One of them is coach. Another one is mentor. There's also technical practices, business. So I'd love to bring out that, whatever it is, 6 segment diagram and say, this is what we probably can align on as coach. And then there's another layer. Team level is different than system level, different than enterprise level. So we need to talk about
Here we go.
Things, right? What?
Yeah.
We're already well. That's you touched on like the biggest difference when people say coach. Like, what do they mean, right? Like, you started off all philosophical, and I'm like, man, this is gonna go rough. And then you hit on like, what's the really important thing, right? Are you helping teams? Are you helping programs? Are you helping enterprise? And we've talked about this before, Jay, on like the different levels and hierarchy in coaching. So we don't have to go down that path again. But
what's your bill rate? The what's your bill rate game?
Yeah.
And we don't need to go. That's what I'm saying. We don't need to go down that path, right? So when we say, what does a coach do in transformation? I think we need to align on like, well, what level are they doing? We can argue about whether that's right or wrong later. In fact, we already argued that at another podcast. So I'm fine if we say we can have it be fuzzy in terms of what level, but we can't, it's not like they're doing the same thing. You know what I mean, Giff?
Yeah.
So that's an interesting wrinkle, Murman, that I really wasn't thinking about, but I do want to come back to that when it comes to the question about what point do we bring them in. Rob, based upon your experience, how would you define, somebody says we need an Agile coach, and you say, okay, well, tell me what an Agile coach means. What is that expectation? What's the baggage that word comes with?
To me, an Agile coach, right, is a person who helps other people find the best version of themselves, right, in an Agile context. To me, that's always been my definition. And when I talk to Agile coaches, that's what I look for, right? Is this person enhancing other people? Are they helping them enhance their practices, right? And there's one part of it that I've been hooked on a lot lately is how much can an Agile coach help other people unlearn bad practices, right? So to me, that's what I look for in coaches. That's what I expect from coaches, and that they behavioral model that, at all times.
Let me jump in. How do you tease it apart, whether it's a systemic problem or an individual problem? And then how does the coach show up differently? It seems, Rob, your focus might be on, how can a coach help an individual be the best version of themselves? And that can be many different ways, whether it's coaching, mentoring, technical, et cetera. But what do you do when that person's in a system that produces results that are less than optimal? Or what do you look for?
So in the system, right? So the system of like a, like a larger context, like a cross-functional context, right? Is that what you mean by system?
Or there's some perverse incentives that's, trying to get
a group of people that are governed by rules that are larger than just one person, right? We can use the C word culture, if we like the system and yours as well.
To me, a good coach, right? I mean, they find that balance, right? I mean, they're going to have to work within the system, but at the same time, they're trying to move people towards, a better place, right? A better way of working. So can they still move those people, right, in that direction, but do it in a way that still respects that environment, right? So, I mean, to me, a coach, I always like the coaches. I work best with the coaches that are more progressive, right? They're the ones that they could talk to the people who might resist the change, right? But they could still be that renegade. They could still be that rebel and do it in a way that's progressive, but it's also, it's not ruffling feathers. It's if you're ruffling feathers, it's the right feathers, but you're not ruffling feathers to the point where you're pissing people off and you're losing credibility, right? So it's that balance, right? I like working with those types, the ones that, like I said, they got the rebel mindset, but they ruffle just enough feathers, but not enough to piss people off and lose credibility.
Yeah, I heard that described once as a coach honoring the decisions that have been made prior to them getting there to allow them to say, look, you made the decisions that you did based upon what you knew at the time, right? But we're here to make different decisions. But honoring that past, right? Acknowledging, hey, it's okay, whatever you decided before. Let's just decide what we want to do now. I probably haven't always done it very well, but I've tried to always at least do it. Because that goes back to pissing people off.
No, I agree, Chris. I think that's a guiding principle. I think it should be for all coaches, right? I mean, you honor the past. There was a history there before you got there, right? So you have to honor that, but you have to balance that with that progressive mindset, right? And that's not easy, right? It reads really well on paper, and it's probably easily talked about, but in practice, it's very, very hard to do. I think it takes a very skilled individual to be able to do that.
Jay, I could totally see this is like, because Jay, you've brought coaches on, and you're in your dojo over there, and have you ever had like the, hey, don't bring up this topic. This is a really, really sore topic. It's really difficult for us when we want to start acknowledging things, when people are like, don't say the letters WIP around here. We don't like that.
Yeah, I have definitely been part of those. I've been witness to those conversations where we had, I guess the only way to describe them is like a BC coach as opposed to an AD coach, to using time. I don't want to say legacy coach, but there was a coach who was there before the transformation started, who would say something like, well, don't bring that up, because every time we bring that up, it's a disaster. And you could literally see on the newer coaches' faces, this almost like quizzical, like a Loki face, like Loki the trickster, like, oh, I should definitely bring that up now because you're telling me not to do it, so I should bring it up. I have seen a decent amount of that where people will be told, "Oh, shy away from that because it's problematic." But I agree with Rob's approach, where you do want someone who's going to poke the bear a bit, not piss people off, but poke the bear. So let's pivot from, now that we've defined the hell out of what a coach is. So let's talk about the assumption is, or the scenario is, we're in an organization that's decided they're going to do, to quote Johanna Rothman, the Agile, right? At what point At what point do you need a coach? And I'm going to start with you, Gifford. At what point in your journey, in your transformation, your transmogrification, to steal from Kurt Vonnegut, at what point are you saying, hey, we need to bring in an Agile coach?
Well, it depends on your transformation strategy. It depends is the Agile answer.
Jesus.
As long as you didn't say
that out. We should have the outtake reel. It depends. It depends.
Yeah.
It honestly does. I mean, so, depending on your strategy. So right now we, I like to look at, Agile Coach for 6 teams as a kind of benchmark. So I might start out a transformation with hiring just a Scrum Master. Somebody, if it's 1 team, 2 teams, I might go hire a couple Scrum Masters. And I'm kind of there as the change leader. Are there people in the organization that have done this before that can provide that mentoring and support? What is the landscape of the talent that you already have? So sitting down with an organization and saying, all right, who in your organization has done Agile, is relatively experienced? If the answer comes back, hey, nobody here knows what the heck this thing is, but if we go do Scrum and then later on buy Safe, or we just go buy Safe now, it's two totally different starting spots. So if I have an organization that has absolutely no Agile presence, I'm probably going to go hire 1 coach. Start small, start with a pilot, get the wins, figure out the playbook, figure out the strategies for the transformation, and then scale from there. I can tell you in the organization I'm working at now, where we have multiple development centers. So we have an Agile coach at every development center. And then our largest development center, we have 3 coaches for around 11 teams. In the States, it's, 1 coach to 3 to 4 teams. So it just depends on what the scale is. And as the as the person that's looking out for the enterprise transformation, how much, can I absorb and monitor? It has its pitfalls.
Same question to you, Andy Cleff. At what point do you stop and say, hey, we need some coaching expertise here?
I have a colleague who used a wonderful sports analogy. If you have a pickup game, you don't need a coach. But if you want to play pro, you need lots of coaches. Offenses, defenses, special plays. And somewhere in the middle, there's JV and varsity. So it depends on what kind of game you want to play. And if you want to play in the Pro Bowl or you want to play in the big leagues, that's when you need a good coaching role. I like Gifford's 1 to 3. I think that's a doable ratio. But when you really want to play a mean game, that's when you need a coach.
So I'm going to pivot over to Rob and ask you, Rob, is it possible to, in your experience or in your opinion, is it possible to start a transformation and get the ball rolling without even having any coaches in the building?
Yeah, if you have the right people, if you have enough people that, a coalition of the willing, who are willing to actually put themselves out there, right, and start a little movement, right? Start a big party in the corner over there of the room, right, and create a party where everybody looks over there and says, hey, I want to go join that party. I think it's possible. It all starts, grassroots movement. I've been in organizations that have done that. It worked. At the team level, it was hard to scale that mindset, but it's definitely possible. It just takes a group of people that just want to work better. They want to get up in the morning and feel, passionate and empowered, right? And they want to bring that to work, and they understand by working that way, they can achieve that. I definitely think it's possible. How about this though? What if you looked at it like, think about the coach at the organizational level, right? Coaches are very valuable helping the organization, pivot the boat, so to speak. But what if you brought a coach in because you wanted to have a strong Scrum game, right? That was your strategy. We're gonna have a strong Scrum game, and we got a bunch of Scrum Masters that have the right mindset, and we just need a coach, to coach up the Scrum Masters as their lieutenants, and then the Scrum Masters they take that coaching and they bring it to their teams, right? And you build it that way. I like that idea, bringing in a coach to help the build up an army of lieutenants.
The fallacy in your statement, Rob, is that if you have a CSM, technically you are a coach at that point in time. So there's a little bit of redundancy there. Nobody's going to laugh at that? Fine. Okay. Whatever. I hate it.
I thought you were going somewhere else with the fallacy.
No. He's saying, like, well, we need a coach to guide the Scrum Masters. If they have a CSM, they're already a coach. So what are we worried about?
I am
but if they're
at you, Mom, because the amount of trash Scrum Masters that are out in the industry. Sorry if you're one of our listeners and you're a trash Scrum Master, but I've interviewed 450 Scrum Masters in the last 3 years, and there's none of them. How many of them I hired? Like the amount.
I understand. I'm not making
take it from a different angle. You could have a trash Scrum Master. You could have a great Scrum Master, and your Scrum teams in a large organization can get you 10, 15% more value. But eventually, you're going to hit a different level, and we're talking about program or enterprise, where the interdependencies and the handoffs and the executive oversight stops that ceiling, but puts a ceiling on it.
Yeah.
50%. If you went 2x or 10x, coaching at the Scrum Masters, great place to be, but it's not the end place.
So to say that strategy is awesome, right? For getting the Scrum, if you want a strong Scrum game, like that's great. I think the interesting piece is what organizational aspects do you need to consider, right? So your strategy of, all right, I'm going to get a coach to get aligned on what's our Scrum game going to be like. Well, if you have a company where everybody's in the same building and you're in the same city, in whatever country you're located at, that's a much different strategy than if you have Scrum Masters that are work on remote teams that are spread all across the globe. You've got, teams, not only teams, but offices in if you got a team in 7 different time zones. And for the record, I'm working at a client where we're struggling with that, where we're getting teams built in, more than 2 or 3 time zones.
So,
and your Scrum Master strategy changes there, right? Like it does matter. So and Jay, since you were kind and didn't ask me the question that you asked earlier, I think that those kinds of things are the kind of coach that you hire will really impact whether or not you need to bring them in at the transformation, and when you need to bring them in the transformation. If that coach has, hey, here's my strategy, based on what you're telling me, this is some basics of my strategy, I'd give you more detailed strategy. You would have to interview them and say, how would you approach this? Because if you get a coach that's used to working at the team level, because their bill rate's a little lower, and that's fine if you're only interested in helping your Scrum game, right? But if you say, hey, I need a strategy for my transformation, well, have they written a strategy before? Do they understand the different organizational aspects that come in? How empowered is the coach going to be to actually implement some of these things, or are they going to are the development leaders going to fight them at every single level? All those things play in to like whether you should pull them in.
So I'm gonna agree to that, and I'm also gonna bootstrap on something that Andy Cleff said, where he talked about, okay, well, it's great to have your Scrum Masters be coaches, but when you want to start moving your way up through the organization, sometimes it would behoove you to bring and I hate this term, a program coach or a portfolio coach in, because let's be honest here, I'm a full-timer at my current place, and the running joke, and I've had this running joke at the last 3 full-time jobs I had, is you turn to the Accenture guy and you say, we bring you in to tell our boss exactly what we tell our boss, but because you're 4 times as expensive, they're 4 times more likely to listen to you. So there is a human psychology at play. There is a almost manipulative approach at play where, I bring in the external, Uber coach, the Andrew Leff, right, to coach at the portfolio level, to tell the
I thought we were going to be friends this podcast.
but I bring him in.
Why you got to be?
I love the guy.
Those are two shots across the bow.
But I bring that guy in to deal with
talking about our company too.
I bring that guy in to deal with the portfolio level people that for whatever reason, due to my stature in the company or due to where I sit, or maybe my reputation, my oeuvre, they're not going to listen to me. So there is that approach as well.
Yeah, but there's also a counter. There's also a yin to that yang, which is, there's plenty of times as the consultant I get. I mean, Andy can tell you, like as the consultant coming in, I'm easily dismissed. So I'm more of the oftentimes instead of the, hey, he's expensive, you should really listen to it. It's more like you're the hammer. And when you get yelled at, it's not a big deal because you can't get fired, right? We'll just, because you're the consultant. So we just say the thing, get us fired, right? But when we do that, that just means that they're like, you're a consultant, you don't really know how to work here.
Good,
so
Murman, I will give you that.
It's kind of a, yeah.
I'll give you that. That's a good point,
right? Here's the thing, though, and I'm really struggling with this. Sorry, let me just say this real quick, Andy. You had your finger up. I really think we need to talk about this idea of empowerment, because it doesn't matter whether they're a team coach, a program coach, or an enterprise coach, or they're Daniel Pink himself, right? I don't like whatever or that's written the books that we all love, right? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who they are. If they're not empowered to actually do the things when they say, hey, we should try these things. Can we try an experiment? Can we do these things? If they look at you and say, no, thanks, we're not going to try that. Well, why are you bringing a coach into the transformation? All you're doing is paying someone to just give ideas that you're going to shoot down. It really is a waste of time and money. And I've unfortunately experienced that a lot.
But so there's a flip side to that medallion that you put on the table, Murm, that, oh, you don't know, you don't understand, that won't work here. The flip side is, as an outsider, you have the ability to speak what others won't say for fear
Completely agree.
of livelihood. And a skilled practitioner can say, what I'm noticing here is you're saying X, Y, and Z, but in fact, you're incentivizing A, B, and D. Does anybody else see that? And you can begin to open up the possibility that others will speak up.
So let's throw this back to Rob. I like that. I'm sorry, Gifford, you had your hand up. Would you go ahead, bud?
We should stop announcing that we have people's hands up so that way it doesn't feel so awkward. Holy shit!
It's great audio. Great audio.
Yeah, but look,
then quit raising your hand.
But to kind of pick up with Rob and the idea of growing great Scrum Masters and having a great Scrum game. I mean, there are times in the enterprise, and I work at the enterprise level, and there are times that I need to leverage the good Scrum to basically expose the next constraint, so that I can then show empirically, here is the constraint, here's how we can exploit it, and move on. And so you have really great Scrum teams, but they can't keep the backlog fed. They can't keep we kind of look at 2 sprints worth of a kind of an idea where the heck we're going. If I can't keep that fed, that becomes the constraint. So now the teams are outpacing the basically the program. So the program becomes the constraint. All right, well, how do we exploit the constraint? It starts to enable different conversations in the end. And so you just have to understand your various systems and then use the constraints to exploit it. So that's, starting with a great Scrum game allows you to start to exploit different constraints.
I love that approach, Giff. And it's not just I love that you call it a Scrum game. It's not so narrow as focus on a single role. It's the whole game. It's the whole team and how they're moving the ball around the field. It could be product owners. It could be dev teams. It could be interdependencies between teams.
So I want to take a little bit of a left field, and Gifford, I'm going to ask you this because you just talked about you interviewed like 6,482 trash scrum masters. What are your thoughts on attempting to grow your own coaches internally, like building a cohort? Is that an option where, say, I hire a Chris Murman, right, and I have him work with some of the people who I've preliminarily identified as people who I think would make good coaching material? What do you think about that? Is that an option that some enterprises should consider a little bit stronger, as opposed to just running out and hiring the first 3 jabronis you can find?
I mean, so, at the end of the day, if you have a responsible consulting agency and a responsible set of management, they're looking at the long-term change. We're going to bring these consultants in. We need to have a change team that is left here, build that coalition of willing change agents behind. So if you're doing transformations responsibly, you are looking for those internal change agents that you would want to pair up with one of these coaches to start that growing process. And the number of LinkedIn posts and articles about the Scrum Master's job isn't something that you just bestow upon something. It's something that people have to truly be interested in. You're going to find those people that went to an information session, got the bug, and those are the people that somehow, hopefully your organization isn't a bunch of complete idiots, help identify those people as people to become that cohort or the coalition that will maintain and keep the change moving forward.
Swinging it over to you, Rob, what are your thoughts? Have you had any experience with trying to grow your own? Do you think that would work? Or is that just you just prolonging the inevitable?
It's so much easier when you have people that are the same mindset, right? I mean, they want to work that way. They're willing to try anything. I love the idea of like expanding off of bring a coach in, to coach up the Scrum Masters, right? Because the Scrum Masters really, truly are coaches. I mean, we all know that, right? So if you could bring them in to help elevate their game, right? Then you're forcing the constraints, as Gifford mentioned, right? The portfolio constraints, the product management constraints, things like that. I don't know where I was going with that, but yeah, I mean, I guess I found, yes, I've worked in organizations, I've worked with teams who have wanted to try new things, right? There's some teams that just didn't like Scrum. They're like, well, we want to try Kanban, right? So, it's like, well, shoot, I'm not an expert in Kanban. So we got to go find somebody who's got some Kanban expertise, right? And are they the type of person who is willing to dedicate time to coaching up a team to help them get started with Kanban, right? I mean, to me, it's just, I get energized in the room when there's other people in the room that want to try new things. And so it's possible. You just have to find those people, who they are. And I mean, it's hard. It really is. It takes a lot of courage. People are worried about, their paychecks, their bonus at the end of the year, their future in the organization, all that stuff. And that sometimes overshadows the courage that it takes to be able to try new things, to, be yourself. Like if you got rebel in you, I mean, that's a gift and a curse, man. Right?
Yeah, exactly, Rob. And then, so I wonder, what's the role of the coach at the organizational level to make it safe to be a rebel, to call out those incentives that would suppress the rebellious nature that says, it's time to make a change over here, and I'm willing to stake it, put it on the line to push that change, which I know can be transformational.
Here's the unfortunate thing about coaches, right? You would think that people at the higher levels of the organization, right, like they might listen to their Scrum Masters. And I think they do at some level. They listen to Scrum Masters and what they have to say. But there's this pedestal that coaches are placed on when they're brought into the organization, right? There's this, okay, well, we're going to bring this, 6-figure coach in, $100 an hour coach, whatever it is. And just because they're a $150 an hour coach, some senior director or VP is going to listen to them strictly for that reason, right? So I wonder if coaches just come into organizations just to get those higher level of people to listen, right, and to understand what it takes to move things forward. when you could probably get the same perspective, if not a better perspective, from a Scrum Master who's truly passionate about that role and progressing the organization.
Note to self, please never send my rate card to Rob. Please, 150, my God, you clearly don't know what Accenture charges for services these days.
You were going to say something, Murm?
Yeah, so I really love this topic of internal change agents because I've been really lucky. The last 3 clients I've been at, they've all either started, they already started an Agile Center of Excellence or a coaching cohort or a whatever you want to call it. They all have their own like internal jargon, name, and they're people that they either already have them started by the time I get there, or they're wanting to get it started and they need some help with that kind of a thing. So I've been really fortunate to work with people earlier on in their journey, and it's forced me to remember a lot of the not that they say dumb things, but just I'm remembering the dumb things that I said and the mistakes that I made along the way, and it's allowed me to really it's almost like I grow along with them. But the intent is, they always say I'm going to work my way out of a job, but at some point in time, if you're the consultant, right, they're going to stop, they're going to run out of funds to pay you eventually, whether it's 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year, 2 years, whatever. Like at some point in time, they're going to go, all right, we're going to use our funds elsewhere, kind of a thing. Or, or sometimes they go with cheaper. That's another story. But you got to make sure and get people to carry on, as Andy was Andy was saying earlier, like people to carry on that work after we're gone, right? Giff said it as well, right? How are you going to pick up that torch? I'm going to say, like, let's go this direction, but you got to get people to do it. And it's really hard. It's hard work because you have to really be humble and remember, hey, how did I do it? How do you help people that learn different ways than you do? Not only do you have the different stances to walk them through, but you have different learning styles, different personalities, and none of them are going to be wired the way that you are. So how do you help all of them when all of that complexity is there? Like that's really fascinating to me.
Big shoes to fill. And we could do a whole episode of this. I would argue that the whole idea of I'm going to coach myself out of a job, I don't buy that for a second, because I think, say I have Murman, I have you, say I convert you to you're full time, right? When you're done coaching the enterprise or coaching the product teams or coaching even the delivery teams, you're going to go on and find the next big problem to tackle, right? So true coaches, to me, if you've ever read Seth Godin's book Linchpin, where he talks about these are the kind of people who go out and just find the next problem to solve. That is what you want out of your coaches. So it's a bit of a misnomer to say, I'll coach myself out of a job. No, I'll coach myself out of coaching you, but there's 8 bazillion other problems that I'm going to have to find.
Well, so that, and your idea, your notion of finding a problem is very valid, right? But it depends on the size of the org. You may only start with one piece of the org, and there's other pieces to move on to, right? That's why you see VPs of transformation propping up at a lot of Fortune 100 companies, Fortune 50 companies. That role actually exists now in some organizations. But also, it's not just that, it's also, hey, are we continuously inspecting and adapting the work? The problem is, going back to the original question that we were doing, and that was originally posed to Rob, is in terms of like, is the org ready? Are they going to, and I know I'm like a dog with a bone on this, that like, are we going to empower and enable, right, those transformation agents to actually do the work that needs to be done? Or are we going to keep throwing impediments in their way and say, no, we won't do that, right? But also, as soon as they just see, if the organization sees as we want to just do X, we want to do the safe, or we want to do the scrum, or we want to make sure, or we just want more. We just need 2X, we need 3X, we need 5X from our teams. Like whatever that is, if your metrics are small and your outcomes and your objectives are small, well then they're going to go, well, just give me 18 months of a coach to give me that thing, and then I'll just go on. Which probably says a lot about your transformation before it even gets started, right? I mean, is that kind of what you were leading to earlier, Rob?
In a nutshell, yeah, right? Yeah, I mean, it's we have these set of objectives. We want to get to this place. Where we've gotten to so far is not good enough. And, maybe that's the driver, right? We haven't been able to really get to the outcomes we're after, whatever it is. So we're going to bring the coach in now. Maybe that's what gets them to that ready state. I don't necessarily agree that that's the right way. I think there's got to be a little bit more of a strategy behind it, whatever the case may be, a transformation roadmap, some specific outcomes, whatever the case may be. I think it's just a matter of maybe recognizing, whatever, we're losing market share, or, our attrition rate. We can't hold on to people because we're not progressive in our way of working, whatever the case may be. These are certain indicators that really start to get the ball rolling with bringing coaches in. And then the whole idea of bringing the right coach in, right? I mean, like you said earlier, the rate in Texas is what, $500 an hour? Whatever the case may be.
The state has nothing to do with it.
It's the size of the tires you can put on your F-350.
Yeah. It's the letters that go before my name that start with the company.
Yep, moving along. So Rob just provided the perfect segue when he started talking about, the goals you're trying to get to. Andy Cleff, I'm going to throw this one to you. Is there ever a point where you need a coaching refresh, right? Like maybe you want to swap some resources, out with some old, in with the new. No more Leff, we need Cleff. No more Murman, we need Gifford. Like, is there ever a point where, or is there a warning sign that you would say, okay, we want to swap some resources out, not resources, meat widgets. We want to swap some coaching meat widgets out.
You not only once but twice referred to coaches as resources. Like you were going to get fire on the internet.
I know, it's meat widgets. We're all meat widgets.
If you mean people, we're going to send you some stickers. Yes, there's always a point. And, I don't know what the cadence is, but somebody coined the phrase, either you're going to get Brian fired or shot, right? If you've been in the pickle juice, if you come in as a cucumber and you're in the pickle juice long enough, and you start to get brined, it's time for a refresh. if you're in the hot oil and you're starting to get a little brown around the edge of your side, or if you've pissed enough people off and you're about to get shot, you have to get the F out.
I can't even let him finish this.
No, but I totally agree with Andy.
I'm hungry.
Look,
and then Rob said, Rob talked about if you've lost the rebel. Are we putting
guacamole on me? Is this more of like a sour cream? What are we topping this with?
I think, Gifford, go on, because I think you were nodding along vigorously, bad audio again, that you agreed with Andy Cleff.
Look, so we've gone screw hiring consultants. We're hiring full-time people. We're hiring full-time coaches that I'm expecting to be change agents, as well as a bunch of other things. There are at points that people become co-opted by where the hell they are. And once, you've been co-opted by wherever you're at, you lose your effectiveness as a change agent. So there are times that I'm like, we either need to find some ways to either fix what's going on there and change some of the dynamic there so you're no longer the co-opted person, and maintain that. That is one of the beauty of the consultant is hopefully they don't get co-opted in 6 months, 18 months. But, I've got people here in the 2-year kind of time span, and they're totally co-opted by the company culture. I also got areas where I've got constraints around technical coaches. And at this point, I don't necessarily need a scrum coach. I need somebody to get in there and teach these people XP that can sit shoulder to shoulder and bang on keyboards. So there are times where, consultant versus full-time coach, makes a lot of sense. But, it's something that I struggle with. How do you basically stay unco-opted from the company culture? Because you have to remain a change agent.
What if I got ID that stated that my name was James Gifford and that I lived in PA? and I just showed up and said, hey, I'm Gifford. Like that.
You'd have to have hair and a bad beard, and
I can do
lots of
that.
bourbon.
I can do that. Nope, I can do it. Not a
I'm
problem.
calling your bluff, Murman.
What? I could do it. I'm not saying that I look like him. I'm saying I'll just show up. Like, if we're swapping people out, like, let's just, like, hey, I'm a less annoying James Gifford. Like, let's have at it.
But he does make a point though, right, Murman? Like, is that
I
where you're...
agree. No, I agree. And so here, there's other complexities to this. So this consultant versus full-time piece, right? And James was touching on it without, like, okay, I want people to be, that whole in the world but not of the world sort of mentality for people that.
That's a religious thing. That's a Bible thing.
I'd said that people that keep up with that part of the religion, but this idea of, so that is an interesting piece. But when you go down the consultant route, right? So depending on the size of the company, you have different parts of the org that get their own coaches, that have their own funding for coaches, that end up hiring their own coaches. So I've had multiple, pretty much every account that I go to nowadays, you have different parts of the org that go with different vendors. And so you have multiple vendors of consultants. And so there's almost like the Jets and the Sharks kind of a thing of, they're from so-and-so, or they're from so-and-so. And, and it's almost like we forget that we're there to make the client better, and we're there just to, like, some people are like, we're there to help our bottom line kind of a thing. Also, in the consultant angle, you have some consultancies that really love embedding people with a client for the long haul, right? They want people to live in it, that live in that city, that will be with it. And I'm not going to name any of the consultants, but there's some that really value, like, hey, they've worked with this client for 15 years. They really, well, at that point in time, you're an employee of that company. Your paycheck says something else kind of a thing, right? So it's how long do you have that consultant embedded, right? How long do you do that? Because all of those factors can lead to a very tumultuous environment where you have some people consulting that have been there 3 years, right? And they don't want to go anywhere. They don't have to get on a plane because they're down the street kind of a thing. And they're coaching to protect their paycheck kind of a thing. Now, I'm not saying every coach that's been there for 3 years will do that, but it's the truth. You have that. And you have consultancies that are in there to make the other consultancies look bad so that they can go get rid of that consultancy. We'll bring our coaches in and we'll take those dollars because you're going to spend it on somebody, why not on me kind of a thing, completely forgetting that the whole point is to help the client. Like, all of that completely sidetracks and derails any transformation that you've got going on.
So you were talking about common law marriage, long timers. 15 years with a client.
You know a lot about that where you live, don't you?
No, you can't common law your cousin.
Oh, man.
You can in Arkansas.
Oh, geez. Now we're getting off the rails. So, and I think, Murman, you bring up an interesting point that's probably a different conversation for another time is, be in the world, but not of the world, but not in the world. And that whole idea. And, how long can you really be somewhere before to Andy's, I thought Andy's metaphor was perfect, till the pickling sets in. That's a whole different episode we can go down the rabbit hole on about how long is too long and at what point do you become part of the system you're trying to fight against. Last question, because we're coming up and this has been a good episode. Last question, and I'm going to start with you. Rob. So is there ever a time or is there a signal that it's time to actually jettison your coaches? To move on, to divorce yourself of the coaches you have, maybe get rid of some of the consultants if you don't need them, or is there ever a scenario where you say, okay, I got to know when to fold them, and now I got to fold them?
A lot of times for me, it really, my gut feel, right, pretty well developed. You got your spidey sense, and your gut's really developed. And it really just comes down, for me, it's that, right? It's have they lost the room, right? It's like the same football metaphor, right? As the coach lost the locker room, are people listening still, right? Are they still energized? Where there was once super energy in the room and the coaches were inquisitive, and they were inspiring people. Has that gone away, right? I mean, so it takes a lot of maybe a combination of good observation and a well-developed gut. That tells me that, I think this person, they might be, they might be pickled, right? And so that's what I can see, right? Have they lost the energy? Have people stopped responding? And is my gut telling me something?
Same question to you, Andy Cleff. At what point do you fold them and call your chips in?
And second, most of the things that Rob said, when they've lost the energy in the locker room, it's time to rotate. I don't think there's ever a time in an organizational's life cycle or transformation life cycle where a coach can't add value. Is it the right person at the right time? That's the question you need to ask. You can always use a catalyst that gets you from good to great, and that journey's never done.
Same question to you, Murm. Is there a time to pull the ripcord and eject, watch the canopy goose, or thoughts?
To answer the question kind of in a different way. I'm usually, when a team member comes to me and they say some version of, I've said all that I know how to say in as many different ways possible, and nothing seems to be changing, right? Like, there's a version of that sentence. There's a version of that it's like, whether you're the person that staffs the coaches internally at the organization, right? So if you're like Gifford and you're bringing in consultants and someone says like that to you, or you're leading a team of other consultants coming in, when your teammate says, I've said all I know how to say and nothing seems to be working, right? That's probably a good sign that we should just say, hey, let's either swap you out with someone new. Maybe they can say it with a different tone of voice or different words or new ideas. Or maybe we just need to, sometimes we just need to look at our clients and go, hey, it's not you, it's us. Let's just figure out a way to you to spend your dollars in another way, because we're not helping, kind of a thing. I think that's fair. Good consultancies will know how to do that. And unfortunately, we have a lot of, with money being the bottom line, and or maybe not the complete bottom line. Let me just say that. I work for an organization that we at Solutions IQ, we really care about what's best for our clients. Just like, whether it be any other organization that we work for, right? We try to say we want what's best for our clients, but you have to be honest with yourself and say, man, we're not helping you. Let's just go do something else.
Right.
Because there's work to be found. You know what I mean?
Right. Gifford?
I've been taking it in the face for 2.5 years now. So at some point, you have to believe in the vision. And, as an internal, so we got a mix of internals versus consultants here. We find change. We find the ability to change. I might be only moving it 1 yard at a time, trying to get to the end zone. But, at times, there are people that it's probably time for them to move on and to move to greener pastures. But hopefully you've made the right hiring decisions, and I'm in a position where I need to lead people to not be co-opted and pickled, and it comes down to, what am I doing? We are ultimately looking to kind of bring a different perspective in from the outside, but some of that is kind of recharging the batteries of the existing population. I've been able to hire a really great group of people, but they're kind of at a point where they need recharge. So I do agree with Chris, though. There are times to fold them. When you're in one of those situations where you're like, we're just not really adding value here. We're just running up a bill, and you're not really going anywhere. It's time to maybe fire the client, or swap out people that are getting burnt out on the engagement. Troy kind of posted the other night, kind of really tired about, what's going on there in the situation. We do get burnt out. And if you're, working for one of the big five, you have the opportunity to go to different engagements. If you're, people in the trenches, Jay. I mean, you've been clawing and biting and fighting for, the last 3 years.
Yep.
You probably still haven't released that code to production, but
Really? Got to bring that up. Yeah.
boom, bringing it back from the Wayback Machine. I mean, we sent you a plaque in Bourbon.
Yeah. I still haven't deployed anything. But I mean, so this is going to be a sort of obscure reference for maybe some people, but one of the things I liked when I dug into open space agility, which is Dan Mezek's proposed way of doing an agile transformation, he actually explicitly calls out that at the 100-day mark, the coaches go away. So at the end of the first open space exercise, when you close the first open space, the coaches go away. And there is that understood explicit statement that at the end of the 100 days, when our open space concludes, Chris Murman, you're going away. And we're going to have to learn ourselves. And I mean, while that may be maybe a little abrasive, maybe a little bit too much ripping the Band-Aid off, I do see some logic there with, we joke about coaches getting pickled, but coaches, not only do they get pickled, they start to become a crutch for the client. And you got to take that crutch away and force people to run on their own.
Well, there's also a bit of a high horse mentality, right? Of like, I mean, how many of our fellow Agilists have been like, they aren't ready, or they don't want to do whatever. No, maybe we're not looking ourselves in the mirror and saying, hey, I'm not working. I'm not working for you all. Like, whatever I'm doing isn't working. We have to be able to look ourselves in the mirror and say, I have to add value, and it has to be in a way that helps the client, not does things my way, kind of a thing, right? Like we must be interested about things other than what our next blog post is going to be about, or our next conference topic, or whatever. Like the company moving forward, we have to be a part of that. And that means making compromises. That means making, small steps instead of giant steps forward, and whatever. Like we have to be willing to try that. And if we don't, then what are we doing? And the people that always get butthurt, Jay, that I notice from getting rolled off or from getting exited a little bit sooner than they were intending, or maybe they didn't get renewed when they felt like they should have, a lot of that just means they haven't had that happen before. Some of people have been I've had such good luck with my clients, in the last few years, but I've had years where my client luck was awful. I got handed clients that were not set up for success, or I wasn't set up for success with the client. And that doesn't mean that the client sucked, or doesn't mean my leadership at the time sucked. It just means it wasn't whoever you put there, it wasn't going to be successful, or maybe my specific personality and they didn't put that into consideration or whatever. So if someone's getting hurt over getting exited, it just means that they haven't had that happen before. If my client looks at me today or tomorrow and says, you're out of here, I'm like, okay, like, cool. Like, I guess I get some bench time, or I guess I get some vacation time, or whatever, right? It means that it just wasn't right, and I'll get out there and try it again, because there's plenty of work.
Amen.
Yeah, I'm not even going to try and come up with a closing statement that basically just took us home. So thank you, Murman. Further proving that a broken clock can be right twice a day. Okay, so
my name's not James Gifford.
On behalf of Gifford, myself, Andy Cleff, Chris Murman, I want to thank Rob Legatie for taking time out of his busy evening to join us. Thanks again, Rob. We really appreciate it. We look forward to having you on again. On behalf of Rob, myself, James, Chris, and Andy, I want to thank all of our listeners for tuning in once again. If you enjoyed the episode, please give us a review, a rating, a comment, iTunes, Stitcher, Podbean, Podbros, your podcasting platform of choice. Believe it or not, it does help us improve our ranking in the algorithm. We have so many places that you can join the discussion at this point. It's getting old hat. We have the Coalition site. We have a Discord site. We have stuff all over the place. So if you want to get in on the conversation, you know how to find us. Lastly, we always throw it out there. We do have a Patreon. If you are interested in supporting us, we are always going to be free. But if you're interested in supporting us, feel free to find us and sign up. Our first batch of sticker packages just went out. We had some pretty good new ideas come out. So some of our donors should be expecting those in the mail. Once again, thanks everybody for tuning in. And until next time, this is the Agile Uprising Podcast signing out.